it now? All right. We'll go ahead and get started again. If everyone could find their seats. Appreciate everyone going through the moving exercise. So we will pick up with our regulation workshop on agenda item number 9, Commission General Regulation 435 Archery Cleanup, LCB file number R107-14, Conservation Education Division Administrator, Teresa Mayola.
Chairman Drew. Chairman Drew.
Commissioner Bliss.
Before we get started in this part of it, I want to disclose that I am a volunteer member of the Nevada Outdoorsmen and Wheelchairs program, and that it is a 100% volunteer program, and any discussion or decisions that might be made by this commission, I will not, or the board will not benefit by any of that financially, nor will my affiliation of sitting on that board have any effect in the way that I choose in the future to may vote on this.
Commissioner Bliss, I appreciate the disclosure, and I appreciate your knowledge of this situation, so I look forward to your inputs. Alrighty, I think we're ready for our presentation.
Good morning. For the record, Teresa Moyola, Conservation Education Division Administrator. I have with me today Tim Thomas. He is the Archery Education Coordinator for NDOW. I came before you at the Tonopah meeting to get the Commission's input on adding crossbows as a legal weapon for the severely and permanently disabled in the archery season. I got your blessing to move forward on drafting a regulation. In that process, we made updates for the general archery regulations to clarify definitions of archery equipment that is already legal. There is confusion in the regulation where it referred to the word longbow. A lot of archers, especially the non-resident archers, would call us and ask questions about which equipment was legal just because the term longbow was confusing. So we simply clarified the language to make clear the equipment that is already legal. And then in addition to that, Tim worked on clarifying language, actually changing it in order to make the equipment used for the general archery season more enforceable and understandable by the general archers in the regular season. So we have before you draft language that adds to the regulation the ability for the individuals that have severe and permanent disabilities to the upper torso or cannot hold at full draw standard archery equipment that is already legal under the regulation to be able to apply for an archery disability permit with NDOW that allows them to hunt with a crossbow during the archery season. And then the second bit of the cleanup is removing the word longbow and putting in the bow as it is defined currently in this regulation, and then updating the portion of the regulation where it previously referred to the 400 grain arrow at 150 yards. It defines it now with a draw weight and a let off.
Are you guys ready for questions, or did you want to step through?
Absolutely.
Open it up. Commission questions or comments at this time? Commissioner Lane?
Could you go into a little bit more detail? I notice you indicate that there are a number of states which already have permanent regulations for the disabled, but can you talk about the states surrounding us and what their regulations are in this area, or how similar they are to what's being proposed here?
Correct, thank you. So currently there are only 3 states. Nevada is one of those states that do not have a crossbow for the disabled. One of the other states is Oregon, which doesn't take up crossbows at all. And then the other state is New York, which actually has, to my understanding, recently had pending regulations. So we are one of the 3 states that does not address crossbows for the disabled. And then, of course, there are 23 states in which crossbow is legal archery equipment for everyone. So our surrounding states outside of Oregon have already taken up this issue.
When you say they've already taken up this issue, are you indicating, for example, that Arizona and California have already passed this legislation?
They have.
And it's similar to what's being proposed here? I'm just I'm curious as to see what surrounding jurisdictions have done, and you're saying they've adopted
is
the same
correct.
legislation?
So we do actually have a list of all the states. However, yes, those are two states that both have provisions for crossbows for the disabled in archery seasons. So yes, they currently have that available.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I guess the other question I have, there was some discussion about, someone doctor shopping. I know that there was a discussion about that. How is the determination going to be made then on the basis of a doctor's recommendation, or is there some physical test that's going to be done and to determine, who would qualify for this provision?
So how we have it worded here is that the individual would need to have a certificate issued by a licensed physician certifying that the applicant has the permanent disability. Now, as we at NDOW are not physicians, obviously we're going to have, it needs to be a licensed physician. I understand your concern about doctor shopping, but as we are not physicians, if a physician is licensed by the state of Nevada or the state by where the individual is coming from, if they're a non-resident hunter, I wish I was a doctor, but I'm not. So I do have to say that the language that came back from the legislature says certificate issued by a licensed physician.
Commissioner Johnston?
Thank you, Chairman Drew. I have a quick question. If we looked at Section 5, where they define the term permanent disability,
Yes.
I guess one of my concerns is whether or not limiting permanent disability, meaning one of the upper torso or amputation, how that language came about, and if we couldn't just simplify it, it just says, as used in this section, permanent disability means a disability which prohibits the person from manually drawing and holding at full draw a bow that complies with the provisions of subsection 2 of NAC 503.144. I don't know if there'd be circumstances where someone has a disability that's not of the upper torso but may affect their ability to hold a bow at full draw. I too am not a physician, so I don't know. I just wondered, in trying to address this issue, the civil rights component of that, whether or not maybe we have a more expansive definition of permanent disability to encompass. Would that be comfortable to the department? And
I think that's something we certainly could consider, because what we're really looking for is the disability prevents them from manually drawing and holding at full draw equipment that is currently allowed in an archery season. So we did put a disability of the upper torso or the amputation of both arms because that's typically the injury that is seen. However, I think from the department standpoint, our concern is that the disability prevents them from using legal archery equipment.
thank you.
Other commissioner comments or questions? Outside of the question that Commissioner Johnston had, are you guys pretty comfortable with the way the language came out?
Yeah, the language came out as we envisioned with the input from the commission and the input that we received thereafter. The two pieces, the cleanup, is the second piece, and that actually did come from us from what we've seen with issues with this language in the past.
Okay. And just to be clear, Commissioner Johnston, your recommendation then would be on page 3, number 5. Basically, you'd say, as used in this section, permanent disability means a disability, and then strike everything up until the comma, or through the comma. So disability which prohibits the person from manually drawing, We'd have a strike out of that portion.
Yes, I'd like to see that language struck so we simplify the definition of permanent disability and cover anyone with a disability that prevents them from holding a bow at full draw, whether that's of the upper torso, the lower body, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think I'm comfortable and on the same page with you on that. But we'll take it out to public comment here and see what the flavor is. But I'm assuming, does the department have any concern on that one way or the other?
No, actually, I mean, when we were doing some discussion with the bow hunting community out there, they basically voiced your concern to try to make it a little more specific to keep people from doctor shopping a little bit or inventing a disability, but I really don't think that's going to be an issue, to be honest with you. I think you had a question over there.
Commissioner Bliss.
Thank you, Chairman Drew. I don't have as big of a concern as some might on the doctor shopping. In anything that we do, there might be somebody that tries to twist a law or regulation around to benefit themselves in some way, but something like this, the amount of people that it would benefit that actually deserve it outweighs the one person that might try to construe it in a way to benefit it. And that's something that person would have to live with, in that kind of guilt. And some people could do it, but most people that I know and affiliate myself with wouldn't even consider that. The other thing why I think this is very important is people with certain people with disabilities, sometimes their body temperature, they can't control their body temperature that well for hot and cold, and the time of year, August, is an optimal time for them to be out, the most comfortable time for a person with a disabled to be able to hunt. And I like the change that Commissioner Johnson brought forward. I think that's well needed, and other than that, I'm comfortable with the way that this is presented, and I wanted to thank you guys for bringing it forward.
Any other commissioner comments before I bring it out to public? All right, seeing none, I'll open it up to the cabs. I didn't see anything that raised a red flag, but we are discussing a change, so Mr. Dixon, lead us off.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman Clark. I think Commissioner Johnston's definition of disability is a good one. I think the question was asked at my cab, and I figured that, and it isn't really written in the regulation, but what is the definition of being disabled, period? And so would it be with a doctor's note, or how is that going to be defined by the Department of Wildlife in order to issue a permit to somebody to say or have something to say they're actually disabled to move forward? And my point was, is we do that for muzzle loading with when we went through with the 1X site that you can use if you're disabled with things, and you had to have a doctor's note for that. So I'm assuming this same thing is here, but we didn't have anything defining what you needed to do to call it disabled, or how somebody qualified to be disabled with the department for that. What was the requirements? And that was a question I was asked and I couldn't answer. So if we could get an answer to that, or if it goes in regulation, or if it's part of the write-up that follows, when you guys set out your stuff, what's necessary for somebody to qualify, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it'd probably be better for you to explain it than me.
Absolutely. Teresa Moyola, again for the record. So once we have the regulation in place, so if you were to amend that language, they would need a certificate, like I mentioned, issued by a licensed physician, either from Nevada or obviously where they're coming from if they're a non-resident. And it would need to state the nature of their disability, and that it's permanent, and that it prevents them from specifically this thing. So they would need to visit a physician and get that certification. Then they would bring it to us, and of course our license office would develop a form that comes from the department, similar again to what we do with muzzleloader. That is a good kind of analogy. And once we had those items, then we would, because obviously we're not doctors, so we are just making sure that the pieces of the paperwork are in place, then we would make the determination on issuing the certificate that then they'd have to carry into the field with them, if they were going to be using the crossbow. So that's the issue, that from the certificate issued by the licensed physician, it has to specifically state that that's the nature of their disability.
Right, and the way I read this, basically 3B defines the certificate that needs to be issued, certifying the permanent disability, and then we have permanent disability defined in Section 5, which is where we're discussing the potential change. So I think, Paul, that answers your question. Okay. Other cabs? Seeing no other cabs, public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other questions or discussions? All right, so just so everyone's on the same page, what we're contemplating moving forward with is On page 3, number 5, it reads currently, as used in this section, comma, permanent disability means disability, and this is the portion we would strike, of the upper torso or the amputation of one or both arms of a person or any part thereof, comma, that portion would be striked. So the new item going forward would be, as used in this section, permanent disability means a disability which prohibits the person from manually drawing and holding a full draw of a bow that complies with provisions of subsection 2 of NAC 503144. Is there any objection moving out of the workshop with that strikeout? Okay, seeing none, what we'll do is we will close the workshop on CGR 435 archery cleanup LCB file number R107-14, and what we'll bring back at the next meeting for approval is what we had presented to us today with that strike through. Okay. All right, we'll move into agenda item number 10, Commission General Regulation 499 LCB file number R111-14, tannery/taxidermist, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed.
Good morning, Tyler Turnipseed, Chief Game Warden. Agenda item number 10 deals with taxidermist record keeping. I can read the specific changes outlined in NAC 502455, and then I'll give you sort of a common language synopsis of what that's going to mean. So if we skip ahead in the NAC to subsection 3, it says that in lieu of maintaining a record of a tag, seal, or permit pursuant to paragraph D of subsection 1, a taxidermist who receives a taxidermic item from another taxidermist may maintain a record setting forth the name and address of the taxidermist from whom the taxidermic item was received and the punch number or other identification number assigned to that taxidermist by the taxidermist who received the taxidermic item. That's the most times I've ever said taxidermist in one sentence. The punch number or other identification number must be attached to the taxidermic item during the entire period in which the taxidermist who received the taxidermic item remains in possession of the taxidermic item. And then it goes on in subsection B there to define punch number. Essentially what this means is one taxidermist sending work to another taxidermist. Specifically, it came out of a petition in July of 2013 from a tannery. It was sort of a new thing to us because it was the first tannery that I'm aware of operating in Nevada. So a taxidermist receives an animal to have the work done on and then sends the cape off to the tannery to be tanned. And this essentially allows that record keeping at the tannery end of things to not have to include the hunter's name, license number, tag number, all that sort of stuff. Simply, most taxidermists will punch holes in the cape. They'll have their own specific code that outlines who that cape belongs to. They have their own numbering system. This allows that record keeping to go to the tannery without the hunter's name, phone number, license number, all that sort of stuff. Also comes into play like with skulls and things when a taxidermist takes in a skull to be bleached and boiled or have the beetle treatment. They can then sub that work out to another person that specifically does the skull work or that similar type of work without having to maintain that whole record of tag number and hunter's name, all that sort of stuff. Any questions from the board?
Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I read this the first time and kind of did the Aflac duck take, and then I read it again and got a little more comfortable with it and read it again. Are you comfortable that this is saying what we needed to say with the language that came back? I know there's a lot of taxidermic items in here, so.
Yeah, it's a little bit wordy and it's a handful to read, but I'm comfortable with how it reads and what it's intended for.
Okay. All right, seeing no other questions or comments from the board, I'll ask if there's any comments from the cabs. Again, this is one that I didn't see a whole lot of red flags on. Mr. Cook.
Bob Cook with Douglas Cab. We all did the same Aflac thing that you did, and after quite a bit of discussion, we figured out that it really was simplifying the process by changing the regs, and we're entirely for it. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other cabs? Seeing none, public comment? All right, seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Any suggested changes, questions, or comments before I close the workshop? Okay, seeing none, what I'll do is I will close the workshop on CGR 449 LCB file number R111-14 on tannery and taxidermists. And what we will bring forward is the same wording and verbiage as we had presented to us today. So, thank you. With that, I will open up agenda item number 11, Commission Regulation 425 Trail Closures LCB file number R112-14, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed, informational public comment allowed. And before I turn it over to Tyler, I want to set this up a little bit. This is something that came out of a series of meetings that started with the Trapping Committee, and Dave, if you have any comments, feel free to make them, kind of setting this up. But originally, we had discussed doing, well, originally going even further back, we had discussed a lot of trail and campground offsets in the Charleston area. Cold Creek is not an area that we had much discussion on that initial round of committee meetings that I recall. We've had more recently a long series, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with the committee meetings we've had on visitation time. And there was a discussion of extending some visitation components up into the Cold Creek area. And actually what it came down to is the commission directed the department, rather than to incorporate it into separate visitation times, to actually look at potential offsets. And I believe the direction the department got was probably a little bit vague in terms of let's look at offsets around residents and any campgrounds in the area. And I was able to get out to Cold Creek yesterday just briefly, and what we've got is a residential area that's right on the edge of the special recreational area, and I'm not sure exactly where that line falls in relation to the houses. I don't know that there's designated campgrounds anywhere in that vicinity. I know there's some dispersed camping, and I know that's been a concern that's come back. There's some designated trails and roads in that area, and some parking areas and trailhead type things. And so what I want to do is just with this discussion set a little bit of an expectation. This is purely a workshop based on what I saw and the direction the commission provided, and in visiting past Chairman Robb a little bit on this. I think we may need to look at some more detailed maps coming out of this, and maybe even move this into another workshop once we have a little better information. I appreciate the department's attempt at putting together something. I know a lot of you are here to discuss this, so we'll take a public comment today and see what everyone has to say, but just keep in mind that we're going to take our time on this and really try and look at it and figure out the best regulation going forward. So that's where we're at today. We're in a mode here where we can't approve anything right now anyway, so let's get our inputs and move forward. So Commissioner McNinch, if you have something to present, I'd be happy to hear it. Otherwise, Tyler, I'll let you proceed, kind of under the understanding that we'll probably have some discussion today and may have to come back and help better define some of this with some better maps going forward.
Thank you. Again, Tyler Turnipseed, Chief Game Warden. As Commissioner Drew, or Chairman Drew stated, this regulation comes out of the Trapping Committee. Sort of my disclaimer from the last meeting is that I wasn't fully involved in all those meetings, so I've tried to get myself caught up on that, but it deals with NAC 504-340. And if you skip ahead to subsection C, it reads on page 4, trapping is prohibited other than with a box or cage trap within 1,000 feet of each side of the following designated hiking trails, campgrounds, picnic areas, and recreation areas established within that portion of the Humboldt-Toiyabe National Forest that is located west of US Highway 95 and north and east of State Route 160 in the Spring Mountains. Then it numbers, there was a numbering change to keep those basically in alphabetical order, but the 3 new items to be added as proposed would be Bonanza Trail, number 1 there, U.S. Forest Service Trail number 151, and then number 14, Cold Creek Campground, and number 21, Willow Creek Campground. It goes on to make some further specifications on page 7. Item number 3 there, well, we'll go back. Item number 2 on the prior page. The provisions of paragraph B, C, and D, subsection 1, do not prohibit the lawful placing of a trap, snare, or similar device inside a fence on private property that is located within 1,000 feet of, enumerates A, B, and C there. And then the provisions of paragraph E, subsection 1, do not prohibit the lawful placing or setting of a trap, snare, or similar device inside a fence on private property that is located or partially located within 200 feet of a multi-use route specified in that paragraph. Essentially, that subsection 3 there allows the setting of a trap on private property if it met those specifications. Probably the item that's going to generate the bulk of the discussion would be the additions of Bonanza Trail, Cold Creek Campground, and Willow Creek Campground. Sort of as Chairman Drew referenced, did a little research with the Forest Service and got a call back yesterday from a gentleman from the Forest Service that basically said, yeah, our thoughts were correct in that Cold Creek Campground and Willow Creek Campground are not officially designated sites. They're not on any Forest Service map. They don't have a boundary fence or a fire pit or any sort of infrastructure associated with them. They're essentially, a wide spot, gravel spot at the end of the road where people park and turn around or camp, overflow camping or primitive camping. So I guess my only comment, we will try to enforce it as the board sees fit, but I can see a little bit of difficulty there in establishing, okay, where do we measure the 1,000 feet from, where we don't have a specific structure or boundary or map or anything to measure from with that distance. Any questions from the board?
Commissioner Lane.
Bonanza Trail, though, is a numbered Forest Service trail according to what you have here, though.
True, and that's my mistake. I should say Bonanza Trail, that one's no problem. It's an official Forest Service trail. It's on maps. That one's no problem. We can enforce that with a 1,000-foot setback. I kind of misspoke. I should have said item 14 and 21, the Willow Creek Campground and the Cold Creek Campground. Those are the ones that aren't designated by the Forest Service. The Bonanza Trail is.
And I just want to make sure, Mr. Chairman, that the commission does understand that. I know when we did all the work on the trail numbers at Mount Charleston, when we went through that process, it's interesting. I don't know that, it just seems that we skipped. I don't think Bonanza Trail was never brought up as, I think it was totally overlooked because it wasn't part of that interior part of the Mount Charleston area. I don't think we had anybody there from Cold Creek at the time, so I do think that was just totally missed. So I just want to make that point that this particular trail was never discussed in our other meetings that we had in this area. So I think it's important to note that it is a numbered trail.
Yeah, that was my recollection as well. And in my observation, the Forest Service actually had a really good blow-up map on site. My hope is maybe we can get a copy of that. I don't know if we'll be able to do that, but it actually it showed everything that was designated. A lot of the dirt roads out there are designated with a number. And so I think it'd be helpful to, that's what I was saying when I was saying, if we could get some better mapping of the area and really figure out what is officially designated and what's not officially designated, I think it will help with our discussions going forward. So that's just my observation based on what I saw yesterday. So, other commission comments, questions? Commissioner Bliss.
Mr. Turnipseed, in section 2 and then also in section 3, where it has where it states snare or similar device inside a fence on private property. I'm wondering about inside the fence. I know we just went through a whole bunch of this stuff on the demerit stuff on, properly identifying private property. But so if what this is saying is, if you have to have a fence around your property in order to be able to place a trap, is that how I read this?
Yes, basically something that would show the public that, that they are crossing from that public land onto private, or something, demarking the fact that it's private land inside there so that they would maybe know not to let a dog, wander that direction.
I understand that, but to me, marking of your private property through a fence is to warn people, to stay out and that's your private property, excuse me. But I don't think you should be able to have a fence around your property to tell you what you can or can't do on your property. And I don't know if, there's a lot more people in this room that are familiar with law enforcement than I am, but I don't know if that would hold up or not.
It's a valid point. Yeah, the way it's written, it specifies behind a fence. So yeah, if that's not, if you think that's an issue, then you could certainly look at taking that out. Like I said, I assume the intent is that, it would only be an exemption from the private land, or it would only be an exemption from the setback. If it were something that the public could see, denoted that. But you're right, it does kind of fly in the face of your private property rights, what you can do on your own property.
Yeah. I understand the intent of it, why it was there, but when you look at it, I think it is a private property right issue.
Commissioner Bliss, I might be able to speak to that, and Dave, you can chip in. I think at the time when we had the discussions in the trapping committee under SB 226, if I remember all my numbers correctly, that was something we had discussed, but that was before our foray into all the NRS in terms of what it is properly marked, private property and everything else. And so there may be something we want to look at there, but at the time, I don't think we were very well versed in the trespass NRS and some of the marking stuff. So other questions or comments by the board? Good. Good. All right. Seeing none, I guess I had just one, and that was, I was taking some notes, let me find it here. In regards to page 6, item D, the half-mile offset from residents, that, at this point, that's just cosmetic. That's just wording changes. It hasn't actually changed the area at all from what we previously had. I'm reading that correct?
I believe so. My understanding is, yeah, it's the addition of some grammar and some legal definition stuff that LCB added.
Okay.
With the area included in, the township section and range didn't change any, and the sections didn't change any, just the wording of the area included in.
Okay, so purely cosmetics, not really content
Correct.
changes there. Okay. All right, with that, what I'll do is I'll open it up to the county advisory boards. I know there were some thoughts and comments on this one, so let's start with county advisory boards. Mr. Dixon. And feel free to come on up and kind of stand by on deck here. We'll get things processed. I don't need to call on you.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman Clark. I will say that of all the agenda items on a short agenda, we spent probably close to an hour and a half on this topic. I allowed a lot of public testimony from the people up at Coal Creek, and we listened to things. I think the concerns that sat in here, my concern as chairman and you guys have already raised it, is that it's not enforceable to try at Coal Creek or Willow Creek to call them campgrounds and have something enforceable. Although John Hyde on my board, who's done a lot with wilderness and wilderness trails in the state, basically said that the regulation could be modified, although unenforceable right now, could be modified to use state forest road designations as your offset points, the center line from state forest roads. And I put that in my action report to you guys. I think the other big thing that came out of discussions with the Clark County CAB, and I know that you guys received from Joel Blakesley the Tracy Truman write-up, so I don't need to put that on record that came through the CABs, I don't believe. But I think the big thing is that right now when you start looking at areas across this state where people camp, unofficial campgrounds on state forest or BLM land, people pull out, and there are areas where people will camp. And we'll have congregations of people camping there because it's a good spot, it's near water, or for whatever it is, convenient, it's non-fee. The big concern is, are we setting a precedent if we start to designate, even at Coal Creek or Willow Creek, across the state, a precedent that wherever we have people congregating to camp, it's not an official campground, but we have people congregated to camp, that area will become a permanent offset. And so although it may make sense for the social, moral, and other issues here in Southern Nevada, because the people that live in here, we're trying to address some problems, but this very quickly becomes a statewide issue for all of you guys in all of your areas. In other words, if we're on BLM or state forest land near where you guys are in this camping thing, do you want the same offsets in your areas? And I think once we pass something like this, if we went here, we're well on that path to having set a precedent for doing that all over the state. And that's my concern are one is that you have unenforceable campgrounds and the fact that we're setting a precedent for something that I'm not sure that we want to have statewide. And we can say we're doing something down here logical, but once we start a ball rolling here, it makes logical, anything we're going to use for logic to say why we do something at a campground here, or an unofficial campground here, is going to apply all over the state. And I don't think you can get around that. Thank you.
Other county wildlife advisory boards.
Miles Humphreys, Washoe Cab. We had a little bit of discussion about this, and one of the things that we talked about was what necessarily designates a campground. Now, do we have to have an official plaque there? There's just so much gray area with this, and kind of touching on what Mr. Dixon said, it's going to create a nightmare for the whole rest of the state. And we were totally against it, and we just think that we're micromanaging something that's going to become a big problem. So that's about the gist of Washoe County. But
Any other cabs before I open it up?
Bill Stanley, Clark County. Just to echo a little bit of Dr. Dixon's point, for me and the new guy on the board, just so I'm going to be careful here, having not been a part of this for a long time, but having had some discussions with individuals who live in Cold Creek, Lee Canyon, and Kyle Canyon, it appears to me that we ought to be extremely careful that we don't project problems that are occurring in southern Nevada on the rest of the state. And being from Clark County and having lived here my entire life, having enjoyed northern Nevada, spending an enormous amount of my youth in northern Nevada, I'm really cognizant of the fact that we do have a rural lifestyle that we need to preserve, and I'm going to be an advocate for that, but I'm also going to be an advocate for the individuals who have chosen Cold Creek, Lee Canyon, and Kyle Canyon as their home. And what they're doing in their home, I am really afraid that we are imposing a lifestyle on them that they haven't chosen. And for the same reason, I wouldn't choose to impose these types of regulation on a rancher who lives in Cherry Creek or a rancher who lives in Wells on what he may or may not do with his property that he's managing. I also am cognizant of the fact that I don't want to impose my views on individuals who have chosen to live in in the three canyons of Mount Charleston. So I'm really, at our meeting 2 meetings ago, we had an in-depth discussion about the Overton land use that was done around the Overton wildlife area and the work that was done there. And I think the work that was done there, it could be a model for what we could use to have further discussions about how to lay out where these types of activities would be available for trappers, hunters, and others, hikers, people just that want to have general access to the land. I think using that as a model and going back and sitting down with the individuals who have a stake in this would be beneficial. And I urge the board to do that. Let's have some further workshops. I know after our meeting in Overton, I had several trappers come up to me after the meeting that represented the trapping community and said, those are types of discussions that we need to have regarding the Mount Charleston area. And so I think there's an opportunity here to bring some people together that may have not been at the same place at the time at the table that may be at a different place now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other county advisory boards.
Bob Cook, Douglas County. We had a little bit of discussion about this at our cab, and we didn't really think that it applied to us. But I'm listening to everybody else talk, Commissioner Bliss, both of the cab members from Clark County, everybody else. And I think it's a bigger issue. And I really would like to see you guys carry it forward and have more workshops and get more input on this, because I think I'm not going to say anything that's already been said, but I think it's a good idea to look at it further before we make any decisions. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other cabs? Last call? All right, I'm going to open it up to public comment. In the interest of time, we will have the 3-minute clock. If for some reason you don't get through your comments in 3 minutes, I would encourage you to provide any additional thoughts in writing to us. If you're representing an organization, please state that for the record, and we'll give you 6. But come on up, state your name for the record, and let's get your input. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Myers. I live in Lee Canyon, and today I am representing TrailSafe, the organization TrailSafe. I have a couple of comments. First, talking about Mr. Bliss's comment about private property and fences. Already, the people, the public, do not know where trapping is happening. There are no signs, there are no flags required, nothing is required. So on private property, if there's no fence, how is anybody supposed to know that there's trapping going on? So I hope that if that discussion continues, that we will talk about that particular problem, because the public does not know, they are not aware that this 18th century thing called trapping is actually happening in the surroundings of a large metropolitan area like Las Vegas. Second of all, I want to talk about, someone mentioned any old wide space in the road might be an area where there would be offsets. These areas in Cold Creek are not just wide spots in the road. I don't know if they've got the video, but yes, right here is a sign, and this is really unusual that there's a sign, because for instance in Lee Canyon, in Max Canyon, in Champion Road, in Blue Tree, all the signs are stolen. So it's amazing that there's actually a sign here, but this is an historic site. And it says Cold Creek Ranch, it's an historic site, and I received from the Forest Service this letter that says, Cold Creek is an historic site and an off-highway vehicle staging area, which is the trailhead for OHV youth. It's not, there's no designation. It's primitive camping, just as Max Canyon, Champion Road, Blue Tree are primitive camping. It's not a fee area, there are no facilities at all, but it is absolutely labeled a campground. And the trappers are the first ones to say, well, we don't want to trap where people are congregated. We don't want to trap where there are children and pets. Well, there are children and pets at Willow Creek Campground, and there are children and pets at Cold Creek. Now, Dr. Lane is absolutely correct. I am reading from the adopted regulation of the Board of Wildlife Commissioners, effective December 20th, 2012, LCB file R15812. And in it are listed 25 new trails, U.S. Forest Service designated trails, picnic areas, campgrounds. There are 25 of them, including everything from Cathedral Rock to South Loop to Trail Canyon, Dolomite Campground, etc. Bristlecone, sorry, not Bristlecone, but Bonanza Trail was inadvertently left off. And this is a really big trail. This is a 15-mile trail. I've hiked it twice, got lost once. It's a difficult trail. It starts in Cold Creek at the old Boy Scout camp. And it goes all the way up and over Bonanza Peak and McFarland Peak and all the way into Lee Canyon. It ends all the way down into Lee Canyon, 15 miles of trail. And this should, especially because it is U.S. Forest Service designated, be definitely part of this regulation, which would keep trapping 1,000 feet from the trail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next? Public comment, please.
Morning, my name is Carmen Rhoda, and I live in Cold Creek. And I did send an email to all of the board members. Do you know if you got it? So I'll just kind of make it brief then, since you know my feelings on this. I think they're quibbling over whether, this is a campground or not. I don't know who put the title on of campground, to Cold Creek and Willow Creek. To me, it's immaterial whether they're an actual campground that has toilets and water and this, that, and the other. I think the main issue here should be that we are having a lot of people come up to Cold Creek who are camping there. And our issue is that, is it safe for them to be camping up there when there are traps around? And, we were willing to listen to the trappers, and accept the fact that they were going to have 1,000-foot setback rather than 200 feet. But at the cab meeting the other night, they thought that this was just such an insignificant difference of 800 feet that, just forget it. Well, if it's so insignificant, why don't we just extend it to 1,000 feet? That would make us happy. What would make me even happier is if the camper or the trappers could flag their areas, because up there in Cold Creek, a friend of mine was just barely off the road and her dog got caught in a trap. And and I'm fearful for, people coming up there with their families going on hikes, that some of the kids or something could step in some of the tracks. And I'll just kind of summarize my remarks here. I mean, obviously I'm for stricter controls on trapping in the area when there's so much other land across the state that they could take their trapping to. But I just like to kind of summarize and say that trespass law recognizes that your rights end where mine begins. And I feel that my rights are being infringed upon here by their unwillingness to compromise. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commission. Jana Wright for the record. I appreciate Chairman Drew bringing up the cosmetic change that somehow the wording got messed up when Senate Bill 226 was sent to LCB and then later passed by the Legislative Commission. So that truly is just reflecting the motion that was made back in September of 2012, I think. I certainly support adding Bonanza Trail. It's a designated trail and was just overlooked in all the discussions we had about SB 226. As far as Cold Creek Campground and Willow Creek Campground, I think those areas need to be included, but I understand we're going to get a better map and language and perhaps better identify them. But I wanted to show the Commission something I found online. And you can see that it mentions a Willow Creek campground, although it's not a official Forest Service designation. And it also talks about, up here, Bonanza Primitive Trail and the historic ranch site that Stephanie Meyer showed a picture of that signage. Also, I would like, as you continue to workshop this reg, perhaps there should be a half mile of no trapping prohibited within a half mile of any residence, and perhaps Cold Creek is included in the cosmetic language that I mentioned earlier. So appreciate the Commission looking at this and being very thoughtful in their deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Come on up. I'm not going to call you, so just come on up. In fact, if the next person wants to come up to the other microphone, that would be just fine with me.
Hi, my name is Janet Rhea Little. I want to talk about the 1,000-foot setback in Cold Creek, why I feel that it should happen. First of all, we have a population here in Las Vegas of approximately 2 million people. We have 44 million tourists who visit the Las Vegas Valley every year. And I've lived in Cold Creek for 9 years. And just in the last 3 years, I can tell you the amount of people that have come out there is just gotten to be astronomical. which I mean is fine. It's a national park. Actually, it is a national recreation park in the last few years. When I moved there, it was not considered a national recreation area, which I do have the pictures here, which is the same one she had. It's also the historic site. I'm not used to all this public speaking. Anyways, then we have the fenced areas, which the forestry has fenced off certain areas around the historical area and some of the other terrain to try and keep the ATV drivers and off-roaders from encroaching on the terrain and tearing it up, which a lot of people camp on. It's not a campground, but I can tell you on Labor Day weekend, there was at least 50 or more in this particular area. Oh, sorry. I'm turning it the wrong way. But there's this one, then there's this one. Down by our ponds, signs went up for no camping, no parking within the water lines of the streams, because we're having people pull right up to the streams, so they came in with their horses and they were parking their horses, trailers, and everything. We've got your trash, can it. These signs all just recently went up by the forestry and the BLM because of the amount of people out there. We've got group camp, Camp Bonanza, as soon as you start going up the dirt road. It's not a designated campground, but obviously somebody thinks it is, because they went to the time to use the taxpayers' money to put that up. Then we have want to put your campfires out. That was never there before. 9 years ago, that sign was not there. We got people camping. Then we have the forestry just came in 2 weeks ago and blocked a lot of the dirt roads up there with great big white boulders. Took them about a week and a half. Tons of the roads up there were all blocked. You can't take any vehicle up there now. But anyways, what I'm getting to is basically the influx of people is there. My feeling on it is, to compromise. I understand trapping takes place. It may not be something I'm really wild about, but I have grandchildren. I have 6 of them. I do have pets. My neighbors have pets and grandchildren. And the way we feel about it is that if 1,000 foot, if my dog gets out 200 feet or so, I'm going to call it back towards me. Or my grandchild, if it runs out there. I'm calling it back.
If you could wrap it up for us. Go ahead and wrap it up.
Oh, okay.
But you're at
Anyways,
your time.
1,000 feet would give an extra feet where that's kind of a little far away from my little child, my grandchildren who are 3 and 6 years old, to get away from me. So I'm going to be pulling them back towards me, and also my dog. That was my point.
Thank you. Who's next? That's all right, Dave. Come up to the other microphone so we can go ahead, miss.
It's okay. All right. My name is Edna Clem. I'm also from Cold Creek area. I have been there since 1990. I wanted to address the growth. The town has not grown outside of the limits because if we did, we were on U.S. Forest Service land, so we're tied into that area. But I'm counting the homes that have changed the growth. Since 1999, there were 33 homes on the east side of the Cold Creek stream, and that's where I live, so I'm most familiar with it. It has grown to 51 homes, and that's a 50% increase, so that's significant. The other concern is the U.S. Forest Service doesn't have the campground, but I think all the signs that are shown here shows that there is a large influx of people into this area. The area is also higher use because of the Kyle Canyon fire, which has deleted some of their trails, a lot of their trails and their camp. I'm not sure what all is open, but we're getting more people from there. And I was out walking this morning. We try and do about 2 miles a day. And going up the road were 4 vehicles heading up to Camp Bonanza. 5, excuse me. There were 5 today, and 2 days ago there were 2 vehicles filled with Orientals, and I've seen this before. And we're getting a lot of foreign people coming up there, so it's not just our local people. And the Cold Creek area, we also have an issue of the trapping, because the trapping is being overdone anyhow. And I've been there since 1990, and I didn't even know trapping was going on, so I've got a lot to learn. And I'm trying to catch up. But they were saying at the advisory board meeting that trapping was also a recreation, but it's the only recreation that I know where there's more suffering and there's a monetary gain. And I'd like to read from an article in the Review Journal of May 15, 2014 by Stephanie Myers, which says trapping is a business. Fur sales at an average price of $4.20 per skin, and some prices are more than $1,000, selling primarily to Russian and China. This money is pocketed by the trappers for their personal profit, and we as residents in Cold Creek are the losers because we're getting a real imbalance. We're getting a huge influx of, they're taking out the natural predators, the coyotes, the bobcats, and I don't know what other animals, but with that, we're getting a large increase of the rodents, rats. We're catching a lot. I've never caught rats before in my garden. Now I am. A lot of people are catching mice up in the one has a greenhouse. He's catching up to 60, 70 mice, and I've never even heard of this before. Also, the rabbits are proliferating, and okay, can I just
wrap it up
one
real
second.
quick for me? Do you guys,
Okay.
can you guys see the clock? Is it posted on this side?
Yeah, I
or
can
is
see it.
Okay,
Okay.
please wrap it up.
Okay, all I'm trying to say is we'd like to see it reduced so that we can get a balance of nature back. And what we're just, very much for the 1,000 foot, we'd like to see the setback, and especially along Bonanza and along the homes and the roads in the area if we could. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, Dave Stillwater, Nevada Trappers Association, District Director for Clark County. I've been attending all these CAB meetings and coming to these kind of meetings for a long time. We have already given up much land for safety to keep everybody happy. These campgrounds that they are trying to say, there's all kinds of people there, and maybe there are some people there during the summertime and everything, but in the wintertime there's really nothing on out there. There's not hundreds of people. You might just find a few people. But the thing that really gets me is we go to the CAB meetings, we talk to our people there, we tell them our problems, we tell them our issues. The CAB committee down here basically voted no changes. They don't want no new regulations there. And we've had other issues come on up that come in front of you people. And it's getting to the point where it doesn't matter what the CAB people think. You guys make the decisions. I mean, you got the thing on demerit points. Every CAB committee in the state voted to leave it as is.
Dave, if you want to cover that under public comment, that's fine. Just stick to the subject at hand for now, please.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I didn't know if that was already brought on up. Anyhow, the trappers do a great service for the state in catching the predators, preserving wildlife, and helping. I don't want to see this state go to like Utah, where there's a $50 bounty on coyote ears and stuff like that. There's never been a kid caught in the state that's been reported. Everything is over-exaggerated. And basically, did Trapper's Ed come up? I came in late. Okay, that's farther down the road.
The specific item we're on now is a workshop on the Cold Creek regulations. So.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, not a problem.
Anyhow, we just don't want no changes. We've already made many changes up on the mountain. We tried to help them. If you give them this, what's next? There's going to be more. There always is. We try to be nice, and we get burnt. Thank you much.
Other public comment? Like I said, please, just in the interest of time, because we're going to get tight at the end of the meeting, come on out. If you have something to say, come fill the other microphone so that I don't have to call you up every time, please.
All right, Miles Humphreys, for the record, representing myself. Just a couple things to throw out there. Like one of the gals here, she mentioned she's seen people going up the trail just the other day. Well, I think it'd be important to let people know, because I think there's a misconception of when trapping occurs. There's only 2 months approximately out of the year that the trapping occurs. and how many people are on these trails and in that general area at that approximate time. And why can't we have either the department get in touch with what they have to do to put up certain signs, or possibly organizations such as TrailSafe put up signs that say there will be trapping within 1,000 yards of this designated area. So therefore, people are on a higher alert, and there's not going to be any mishaps. Because I know when I'm out and about chukar hunting, and I'm walking along certain places, I've had my dog caught in traps. Now, there's been very, very, very bad situations because of it, but that doesn't mean that my goal and agenda is to hate every trapper and then, you know, make it a nuisance and abolish trapping and do everything to that nature. So I think that there's a couple things I would like to see, and that I'll probably bring up at certain things, is a sign, and then also the people who are against trapping, let them know that it is only a couple months a year, to where people who are using the trails can maybe co-inhabit with the people who are there to trap and manage the population of the critters and whatnot. So that was just something that I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion or comments at this point? Knowing that what we need to do, in my opinion, is probably get some better mapping, figure out what the current regulation already covers, what it doesn't. And my intent would be to basically, anything going forward would come back to another workshop, and I'd like to do it down here. I don't know that that would necessarily mean a committee meeting. I'd like to keep it at this level if possible, but I don't think, as chair, I'm willing to move this forward out of workshop towards action today. I think there's too many questions, so I'm not going to ask for specific items other than to commit myself to help work with staff to get some better information on where we're at. Ms. Lane.
Mr. Chairman, it's obvious that this is an informational item. We know that we're not going to be able to impact the upcoming trapping season, or the current trapping season. So I would agree with you that, what you're suggesting, I think, is a good suggestion. I don't have a problem with what's being proposed by you.
Commissioner McNinch and then Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the speakers made a comment about basically you have the Cold Creek area, and then you have the Forest Service. And on that map, I'd really, if we could see that delineated, I guess I had a little different vision or a little different thought. I'm not sure what I had in my mind exactly, but it kind of, maybe there's some better delineation there than I understood before that we could see on a map. If I'm not sure what I'm saying, but I guess I should have thought about what I was going to say here first. But I think Edna here, when she made the comment about they have houses and then they have Forest Service out beyond that, and I'm kind of curious to see where those lines are. I didn't see a map around the Cold Creek area like you might with like we did with the fire discharge area around Vegas or something. I just didn't see a delineation around Cold Creek like that, and I'd like to see if there is one.
And to add to your confusion, the boundary between what is and what is not recreational area is also in that vicinity, so there's a bunch of things going on. Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you, Chairman Drew. A quick question: when the mapping is done and kind of better visualization of this area, is it possible? And I'm obviously coming into this issue a little late, I guess, trying to get up to speed. Is there ability to get information on the number of instances where a pet may have been caught in this area? I don't know if that information is available or can be gathered, but I think that'd be helpful to know as well. I'm hearing from the public that is a concern, and I'd like to know, has it occurred? If so, how often? And the more information, the better off I think we all would be in taking a look at this.
Duly Duly noted. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Blish.
It was brought up about some of the signage, and we've seen a lot of pictures of different signs that are around there. And then some folks that didn't know that trapping was even going on until the last couple of years. But I was wondering about a sign that just basically said, you know, give a NDOW website and phone number, and to familiarize yourself with the hunting, fishing, and trapping regulations in the area, you know, and give that phone number and an address where people can you know, educate themselves on what is happening on public land during certain times of the year, you know.
All right, with that, I will close agenda item number 11, CGR 425 Trail Closures LCB File R112-14. Just being very clear that the intent is to get some better information on this and workshop it down the road here. So with that, I will move to item number 12, Special Incentive Elk Tag Arbitration Issues, Eastern Region Biologist Ken Gray for possible action. This is kind of a continuation of a discussion we started in Fallon. So Ken?
Ken Gray, Department of Wildlife, Eastern Game Biologist. Yeah, as Commissioner Drew just mentioned, last month I gave you an overview of the two private land elk programs. I talked specifically about some of the problems that are associated with the incentive tag arbitration process, and basically provided three possible recommendations that it could come to the commission level if so chosen. I guess I'd just like to emphasize a couple points. One is the department really does think that the incentive tag program is a very successful program. I think it has provided a lot of connectivity to the ranchers and the department biologists. I think that we have seen elk issues resolved because of our elk programs. And so I think I speak for most of the biologists out there is that we would like to see the incentive tag program continue much the way it has continued. I will say that this program is under extreme scrutiny sometimes. I can tell you that Western Watersheds has gone through our files looking to see the laws, to see the processes that we've used to issue the tags. I had John Marvel going through my files when I was the Area 6 biologist, not only for elk incentive but also for the damage. Just this year, we had a ranch want to go to arbitration, not because they were upset with the tags that they had, but they were upset with the tags somebody else was getting. A lot of these issues we've been able to resolve to show the laws and how we've dealt with things and have kept things from accelerating into a higher level. So I guess with that, I guess I would open it up to questions. Maybe just a reminder of the three things that we're looking for consideration. One is that we think that it could be taken to the commission level, and you guys could act as the arbitration, much like you do with license revocation. It could go to the existing elk damage committee, and they could act as the arbitration, maybe make some modifications along that line, or even think that a new subcommittee of the commission could be developed that specifically addresses elk arbitration.
All right, I'll open it up to the board for questions, but Ken, I don't know if you had a thought. I've got some initial thoughts on this, and I'd be interested to hear what the other commissioners have to say and what the cabs also have to say on this, because I know it's an issue in some of our rural areas, and I think some of those cabs probably didn't get a chance to meet. But in my opinion, I really think at a minimum, arbitration needs to be subject to open meeting law, and just shed some daylight on this, because it seems to me that would alleviate some of the confrontational aspect of it that goes on. I'm looking forward to the discussion on whether we should have it kept at the local level or not. I understand the reason to do that, but I also understand the reason for potential conflict on that. My druther would be at a minimum that we have a a backup so that if a regional panel can't be established, that it would come to our level. I don't know, I kind of lean away from the whole commission and lean towards establishing a committee, but those are just my initial thoughts. And I really don't have a problem in regards to the June commission meeting, because I think it would help to set that, whether it's the whole commission or a committee, at least everyone knows the playing field at that point. And again, if we did that, you know where it's at, it's going to be an open meeting, and I think we do away with some of those issues. So I'll open it up to the other commissioners. I invite your thoughts, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Morai, and then Ken, I'll give you a chance to address anything you hear before we bring it back out to public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that I voiced at the last meeting my concern for keeping it at the local level, and however, my belief is that, Ken, maybe if you could come back up, I have a question for you. You have the experience and you have the belief in the program. So my feeling is that I would kind of like to defer to your opinion on what of these alternatives that you've presented here. What would be the best route to take to correct the problems that you're having with the arbitration panel and trying to get things to move forward?
Well, I'm certainly sensitive to the local input into the whole thing. I guess as I was stuck behind 400 trucks between Alamo and Las Vegas yesterday, I thought about this quite a bit, and it would make, to me, what would make the most sense is to keep it with the elk damage. You've already got the elk damage committee established with the commission. You've already got one local panel member, because except for 2 years since I've been here, the ranching representative has always come from Elko County, the exception being when Mr. Vogler was on for 2 or 3 years. He was from White Pine County. So we've already got a local representative there. You've got Mr. Commissioner Wallace on it, who represents agriculture, and you've got Corey Lytle right now, that's from Lincoln County, representing sportsmen and ranching. So we've already got the basis of a local type committee already. I think that if you added maybe a game board member from Elko and from White Pine County to round out that committee, I think that you would achieve, you'd have almost an entirely local type committee. I think the advantage of having it with the June meeting is that on 2 occasions in the process of trying to get a committee established, one arbitration hearing was held on September 28th. By the time we got the panel assembled and everything like that, we've already missed, it's not really fair to the landowner, we've already missed the muzzleloader season, and trying to sell that tag, it puts a lot of stress on him. 2 years ago, the arbitration panel hearing wasn't held until July 17th or 18th. So I think having it, if everybody knows the consistency that this is going to be held in June, I think that's a really important step in the right direction. And I think another big thing is puts us in the way it currently is situated, it puts us in a really tough position, because we are one of the arbitratees, I guess, and yet we have to facilitate the choosing of the members. We have to work with the CAB or whoever's supposed to choose the members to the panel, and then we're also the ones out there trying to get the members to the whole meeting, the input put together and sent to the agency and then to the license office, and it really has put us at some challenging situations sometimes. So I kind of rambled on a little bit, but I think the elk damage committee would be the most logical from my standpoint.
And just to, I guess, to play maybe a little devil's advocate, my only concern with going with an existing committee is that if we have members designated on that committee that may have a conflict of interest, because it still is a pretty small world when you get into some of these issues, it may not give us the latitude that we need to put the right members on, so that we have a fair panel and that we don't have people having to abstain from votes and things like that. So that would be my only devil's advocate play on that. Whereas if we set up the committee on an annual basis and we knew who was coming in, we could pick the members that don't have any issues or CAB members who are willing to participate. So just food for thought. Mr. Morai, did you have any other questions or comments at this point? Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Ken, at the last meeting, obviously there's comment, and I see a letter here from, I can't read with my glasses not on, Mr. Simon, just regarding the pressure that the panel's feeling. They're feeling quite a bit of pressure on this whole thing. Has anything changed? Is there going to be kickback from, if we move away from the arbitration panel, has anything changed to give you an indication there would be kickback, or do you think that there'd be the relief that everybody's hoping for would be provided if we took some kind of action away from the arbitration panel?
Well, I don't think you're going to get any kickback from the cab members or the people selecting. I mean, you may get kickback from a couple of the ranchers that were going to the arbitration every year. It's not going to be as easy for them, probably to go before a commission subcommittee, as opposed to go to Ely into the back room type situation. I haven't heard of any backlash from anybody I've dealt with, and I guess if I could, Commissioner Drew, I mean, I totally respect what you're saying about the conflict of interest, but it's another problem we face is that one of the business representatives on the panel, 4 days after the arbitration hearing, he was observed out providing a paid-for service with the rancher that was just being arbitrated. Now, if he had to make a decision against that rancher that he was providing business to, it really put him in a pretty tough situation, or vice versa. He could be subject to a lot of scrutiny from the sportsmen or everything like that. So it really is a legitimate concern, especially at the local level now.
Mr. Chairman. Just a real quick comment. So Ken, I appreciate the time and thought that you put into it and getting us a couple of options, and I definitely like the concept of the committee. And I do think, I said it last time, I think that the commission is really needs to take the lead on it, and I think that's a real viable way of doing it, and just seems like that'd resolve a lot of the issues.
Mr. Chairman, Ken, just from our own edification, what's the largest number of elk incentive tags a single rancher gets currently?
I think we've been as high as 23. Yeah, the Wine Cup Ranch in Elko County owns well over 100,000 acres, and so not every year, it varies, but I think this year that particular ranch got 13. So.
Do they run a guide service out of there? Do you know?
It varies. A lot of the ranchers will broker their tags through the guide service and provide that service, either selling the tags or putting a guide associated with it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can look at it from the perspective of even if the whole commission, if this is something that happens once a year in June, and we basically have representation from every slice of life in here, from public to farming to ranching to sportsmen, then we don't have to go through the process every year of picking a new subcommittee that would be unbiased per se. I mean, you would have a panel of 9 people to have the hearing and have it done, and it's already set in place. It's not another process that we would have to go to each year in order to do it. And then that way you also, with 9 people, you don't have, on the subcommittee, like if you've only got the 3, you're kind of in that same position again of somebody that might be feeling the pressure of, oh, I know so-and-so, or whatever like that. That's why I kind of feel like maybe at the commission level, it might be better serving to the arbitration panel itself, to the rancher, to the department, to have more of an opinion. That's just kind of where I'm at on it.
Commissioner Bliss?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Drew. I'd have to agree with Commissioner or Vice Chairman Wallace. I think that if it comes in front of this 9-member body, that if there is 1 or 2 of us that might know that person, and we have to abstain or recuse yourself of being part of it, that it can still flow along. If you if you have it on a subcommittee in a smaller level, you may be getting right up to the wire and saying, well, hey, I'm going to have to step out of this, and you're trying to find an alternate, and then that person comes back and says, well, they just kind of set it up to where, you know, for failure, and I think the whole idea of this is bring it out to this public process, and there's nothing, no backroom deal or whatever people are being accused of. And like I say, it's the one meeting in June, and boy, I hate to just keep repeating what Vice Chairman Wall said, but I agree with him as far as just bringing it to the commission.
Other thoughts or comments? Commissioner Lane?
I guess I would disagree on that. I think as a commission, we're getting more and more petitions, and I can see a point where we're going to be spending a lot of time on dealing with some of these issues, as well as court cases that we may be getting, and I would like not to be involved in those I see that as a very specific issue, and it seems to me on a committee basis, which is what, Mr. Chairman, you've kind of proposed, that you could deal with those issues. Number one, they're still going to have to be very transparent. They're going to have to follow the open meeting laws. The committee will have to do that, and you could make it you could certainly make it large enough with CAB members and commission members, if you do have one member that may have an issue or a conflict of interest, that person wouldn't vote on that particular case. So I don't see why it couldn't be done at the committee level.
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Gray, how long do these arbitration hearings last? I mean, is it a pretty short proceeding in which the individual landowner makes a presentation, then a department makes a presentation, and it's over in 30 minutes? Are we talking half a day, or?
No, I think you're talking an hour at the most, especially in a structured type meeting. I mean, really what you're doing is looking at the evidence that the department has based their decision on, and maybe a lack of evidence that we didn't consider from the landowner at the time. So I would say 30 to 45 minutes at the most.
I guess I don't, with that being said, I can see where it could come to the commission and not take up too much time. I also think, though, that when the arbitration demand is filed, you could appoint a panel at that point in time rather than have it pre-existing. So I don't really have strong feelings one way or the other, as long as I think one of the components was it be more of a public and open process. If the panel is appointed from CAB members or whoever, to ensure that that's an open proceeding that people can attend and notice would be given of the hearing, and that would alleviate a lot of those issues then, I think. So.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, and I guess another model that is kind of going through my mind, if you were in a case that you ended up with multiple arbitrations at one meeting, and it were to come before the entire commission, I'm thinking, and maybe the DAG can help me with this logic, but if the commission is the ultimate arbiter, there's nothing that prevents the chairman from basically setting up a committee to listen to the discussions first, and then the committee recommendation comes to the commission, and ultimately the commission has a final say, but you could spend the time going through the details with the committee, and then the committee could recommend it up to the commission. I mean, if we opened it up and said that, ultimately arbitration will be decided by the commission, is there any reason you couldn't set up a committee if you had 10 of them come in 1 year, and you didn't want to do it at a full-blown commission meeting? You could set up a committee, have them bring the recommendation forward, and have that structure in place.
That's a similar process to the way many open bodies work. They don't all act as a judge and jury at the full level. They will set up subcommittees to vet out the particulars.
So by basically, if we were to amend the NAC to say the commission will be the final arbiter, there's nothing that prevents us from utilizing that structure down the road if we need to do that. It gives us latitude to go either or.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Bliss.
Thank you. With that idea, would it still all be done at the June meeting? Because if it goes to that and then it goes to another process, then we might be getting into, if we change and issue an extra tag, or you take tags away, you your season starts in August, and so now you're going to be either doing it for a following year or previous year or something. So I think it's important to be done at that one meeting.
Yeah, in my mind, I don't think there's any reason that you'd have to go away from the June meeting, and if you wanted a committee to vet it first, maybe the final decision's made on a Saturday, but the subcommittee meets on a Thursday or something. But to me, there's no reason that you couldn't still say the commission will make those decisions at the June meeting. Anything else from the commission? Ken, did you have any follow-up thoughts or comments before I open it up to public? Okay. This is an action item, so I'll open it up first to the CABs, County Advisory Boards. Any input on this?
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County. We discussed this and felt very strongly, as Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Johnston said, that it should be a commission-level decision. You could have a subcommittee, but we really felt that the impartiality comes up to this. You guys deal with all kinds of arbitration things, and it just pulls it up and it gets away from the personality issues that have been going on with this. And I couldn't agree more with what you started with, Chairman Drew, which was the making this whole process underneath open meeting law. I think the problem has been is it hasn't been under open meeting law, and it's been backdoor, and there's been a whole lot of things where people suspect stuff, whether it was real or not real. And so I think bringing it to the commission level and having it part of open meeting law is perfect. Thank you.
Any other CABs have input on this? I saw a few reports come back, but Douglas, any others? If there's any others, come on up to the next microphone.
Bob Cook, Douglas. It's clear that White Pine County's having a hard time with this. I think it's a good idea to let the commission make the final arbitration decision. The fact that 4 out of the 6 arbitrations were from one landowner is a statement, and the fact that everybody on the panel has resigned is a statement. Douglas Cab felt that it would really be a good thing for the commission to take that role and take it away from White County, because they clearly are not interested or are having issues that they can't resolve within their own area. So, thanks.
Thank you. Any other CABs? Last call. All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Any public comment on this issue? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I think this is an action item. We could provide action to the commission or the department, excuse me, to move forward with drafting a regulation, I believe, at this time. Unless, Tony, you and Ken have heard enough that you don't need a formal motion, but I guess my druther would be, let's give them something specific to move forward with if you guys are comfortable throwing out a motion on it. Commissioner Wallace.
I'll take a stab at it, guys. I move that we direct the department to work towards getting a regulation in order to put the Wildlife Commission in charge of acting as the arbitration panel.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. The only other piece of the discussion that maybe we left out is anything specific to the June agenda.
I just assumed that was in there, but to make it to any arbitrations to occur during the June commission meeting.
Okay, so a motion by Commissioner Wallace, seconded by Commissioner Young to direct department to draft regulation, basically making the commission the final arbiter and having those done at the regularly scheduled June meetings. So I'll open it up to discussion by the commission. Commissioner Johnston.
One thing I would perhaps see added to that would be that the regulation provide that the commission has the discretion to set up the arbitration procedure as the arbitrator. That gives us a little more flexibility on how we want to operate.
Maker of the motion and the second, all right with that being in the intent?
Motion maker agrees.
Seconds are all right with that.
Okay. Commissioner McNitch.
So, Commissioner Johnson, were you referencing the standing up a committee possibly? Is that what you were referring to, or?
I'm going to go against prior comments where I wanted things more specific, and now I want them vague. What I would like is just that the regulation says that the commission shall act as the arbitration arbiter and shall have the discretion to set up the appropriate procedure to to handle the arbitration process. That would give then the commission the flexibility to hear it as a 9-member board or to set up a committee or an arbitration panel or something as the need arises and as the case may be.
Any other commissioner comment, discussion? Commissioner Morai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can support that because I think we have the, in my mind, the basics of what we need to have happen. If we have the flexibility to go to a committee, and also the flexibility that the commission can look at it, because I know that if you go to a committee, that means another series, maybe not series, but another meeting with the panel and travel and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think the way that the motion is structured, that I can support that.
Maybe this question, Ken, are you clear with the motion? Tony and David, are you clear with the direction being provided? Comfortable?
Yeah, I was just looking at NAC 502-42283, describing the arbitration panel process. And number 1 currently specifies the commission may select an arbitration panel from the residents of the county, but it's a may, and then there's several other parts to that. And I don't know if it's so vague or if it's overly specific that we need to actually revise that NAC, or if it's something that we could handle in policy. But I think that the point that Commissioner Johnston makes, I don't think that the commission should paint themselves into the corner specifying which month it should be done or exactly how it should be done, but I like the idea that however we do it, whether we do it through NAC or whether we do it through policy, we provide that flexibility for the commission to ultimately determine when and how it be performed. So we can look at the existing language in NAC, and it may warrant that it be revised, or it may be such that it's sufficiently, providing those general sideboards, and that we could do it through policy.
So I think at this point, what I'll do is I could call for a vote, but I think I would ask the motion maker in the second maybe to withdraw their motion at this point, and maybe what we'll do is call for a clean motion to allow the department the discretion to determine whether policy or NAC is the route to go, and give us the flexibility here to do what we need to do. Are you willing
Yes,
to
Mr.
withdraw your
Chairman,
motion?
I'm willing to withdraw my motion.
I'll withdraw
Mr.
my
Chairman?
second.
Before you do that,
Before we withdraw anything.
yeah, the NAC is going to need to be completely redone, because the part that Director Wasley was looking at in the first section, you might be able to work within the parameters, but as you go further into the, especially section 2, 3, and maybe even 4, those will have to be eliminated if it's going to go back to the commission and you're going to appoint a subcommittee.
So with that in mind, I still think it might be cleanest, just so we're on the same page, to do the withdrawal of the motion in the second, which I understand is comfortable. And I'm going to tee Mr. Johnston up for his first chance to make a motion, because I think he's got a good handle on this, and ask for a motion in that regards. Clean motion.
I would move that we ask the department to draft a new version of NAC 502.42283 that provides, pursuant with the authority set forth in NRS 502.142, that the commission shall appoint or serve as the arbitration panel and have the discretion to set the procedure by which the arbitration proceeds under the commission's authority. That would be it, I think.
Second.
Okay, so I got a very good first motion by Commissioner Johnson and a second by Commissioner Wallace. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ken and Department, for the inputs. Item number 13, Trapper Education, Chief of Conservation Education, Teresa Moyola, for possible action. I know we're pushing up probably against lunch, but let's try and get this number 13 in.
Sorry. Thank you. For the record, Teresa Moyola, Conservation Education Division Administrator for NDOW. I'm back to you from the last meeting to present some options and considerations in regards to Trapper Education, looking for your input to move forward on a possible program. So, Trapper Education could be mandatory or it could be voluntary. If you chose to pursue a mandatory Trapper Education program, that would require the creation of regulations to establish authority for such a program. I spoke to our other DAG who believed this could be done through the NAC and does not require an NRS change. I must point out that NDOW does not have the authority to create mandatory education programs for the general public or for constituencies over which it does not have other regulatory authority. So if we don't have regulatory authority over a group, we cannot create mandatory education programs. So when you look at mandate options for Trapper Education, you could have it completely voluntary, not required in order to obtain a license. You could have it totally mandatory, required for obtaining a Trapper license. Trapper Education could be required one time only, as is the case with Hunter Education, or it could require recertification over a designated period of time. Trapper Education could be exempted for certain criteria. For example, like we do with Hunter Education, we could exempt it for people who were born after or before actually a certain date, or we could exempt trappers that have held a license for a designated period of time, something like 2 out of the last 5 years, 3 out of the last 5 years. So if you were looking to create a mandatory program, you would have to consider if you wanted exemptions or if you wanted to simply make it mandatory once you enacted a new regulation. The next thing I think we need to look at for a Trapper Education program is the course objective. Are you looking to teach students how to trap or simply inform them of Nevada's trapping regulations? Keeping in mind that, of course, trapping regulations can change. So with Hunter Education, like is the case even with obtaining something like a driver's license, you take it once, it's once in a lifetime, unless for some reason you get a violation. And then it's up to the individual to keep abreast of new regulations. So wanting to look at what your course objective is and move forward from there. I put together a list of things that Trapper Education could consist of, based on my experience in other outdoor education programs. Things like general trapping practices, trapping safety, ethics and responsibilities, preparing trapping equipment, knowing your species, handling your catch, and of course Nevada-specific regulations. Those are just some, like I said, based on our experiences in other outdoor education programs. Of course, course delivery. How would we deliver Trapper Education should we so choose to enact a program? Obviously, there's a variety of methods. Each has specific strengths, each has specific weaknesses. I have to stress, Trapper Education targets a limited number of students, obviously. My concern is maintaining a viable program, which is going to be necessary with the limited resources that we have. So unlike Hunter Education, where we put 5,000 students a year through that program, this is going to be a much smaller program, and viability is a concern to me. So some of the options, not trying to reinvent the wheel, some of the options that are out there that we're using in Hunter Education and Angler Education and that other states are using in Trapper Education could be some of the following that I've suggested. A proctored exam. This is a model that we use in certifying guides, for example, that it's a process by where there's no formal educational components, where the individual would simply come, take the examination that would be proctored either by staff or volunteers, and the pass-fail would be determined usually by a percentage of correct answers. Obviously, we'd have to consider the limitation on a number of times an individual could pass or fail, and whether or not we'd allow them to pass. The online-only course. Now, of course, this would be provided by a vendor. We have several vendors that provide Hunter Education online. There are a couple vendors that provide Trapper education online. They cover basic Trapper education that already exists. They can be customized to have state-specific information provided in them. Of course, this kind of program is available on demand at any time. The Trapper logs on, they pay a designated fee, they go through the course, and they're given a certification. And then the instructor-led model. This is the model we're currently using in Hunter Education. It's independent study followed by instructor-led classroom time and then a final examination. Obviously, there's limited availability based on the number of students for this one. This is a concern maintaining a core of volunteers for a small program. It's brand new. We would need to create that from scratch. It would not be available on demand. It would only be available when we could get classes set up. But it can be fully customized, obviously. We'd be creating a brand new program there, as that does not currently exist in our outdoor education model. So once we have an idea of what kind of course we're looking to provide, the costs and the program development are a consideration. My biggest consideration, creating a cost-effective program with long-term viability. Again, the small number of students increases the cost per student, and it limits our ability to provide, the education routinely. So if we looked at a situation where we did a proctor exam, of course that's at a low cost to the agency. We'd have staff time for initial development, staff time anytime we made updates, and for proctoring the exam or training a core of volunteers. If we did an online-only program, that's low cost to the agency, it's minimal cost to the student pays the vendor directly. We'd have initial course customization costs, which can be significant, but they're usually one time, then with minimal updates as course content changes. Staff time to develop that course content, but it's a minimal ongoing cost to the agency. And then, of course, the instructor-led model that we're currently using, like in a Hunter Ed situation, it's a high cost to the agency, it's a minimal cost to the student. If we use the Hunter Ed model, it takes a great deal of staff time. Each of our regions has an outdoor education coordinator, sometimes two, where we split Hunter and Angler Ed. Those are full-time positions. They manage a core of volunteers. These volunteers have to be trained. They have to be retrained. They're mandated to teach a certain number of courses over the biennium in order to maintain their certification. It requires ongoing volunteer recruitment and training. Maintaining a core of volunteers is often difficult when you're talking about having limited classes and limited class dates. The other thing I really wanted to point out is our state-mandated background check for volunteers. A couple of years ago, the legislature passed the requirement for our volunteers, especially those dealing with the public, our instructors, to pass criminal background checks. We also, if we're looking at that Hunter Ed model, instructors with wildlife violations are often, in fact, most often, not able to teach our Hunter education courses. Reason being, if you have wildlife violations, how could we send a student to you to when they receive a wildlife violation? We send students back to Hunter Education who receive a violation. We can't send them to be taught by a violator. So there are some exceptions to that if it happened in youth or it's old or it was minimal, but most Hunter Education instructors can't be wildlife violators. There's costs for that. Printing of the educational materials is quite high. And in Trapper Education, we'd be talking about short runs. We receive a lot of economies of scale when we do Hunter Education materials because of the volume, but in Trapper Education, we just would not be looking at that kind of volume. So we'd have significant cost to the agency to maintain that style of programming, or of education programming. So those were the things I just asked for consideration to look at. Obviously, we can look at other types of educational programs, but in an attempt to fit into the outdoor education model we're already using and in an attempt to not reinvent the wheel, those are the main types of education programs that are available.
Appreciate the presentation, Commissioner Young.
If I heard you right, Teresa, it sounds like the online is by far the cheapest, most efficient, easiest, and cost-effective process. Is that correct in your opinion?
It is if you wanted to provide course content. A proctored exam that we just simply said you're on your own to study and come take an exam would be a very minimal cost. But if we wanted to provide a real educational component
Right.
Online would be by far less expensive than maintaining a core of volunteers that staff has to manage to actually provide in-person instruction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bliss.
Thank you. Have you thought about just incorporating trapper education into our current hunter safety program? Because, I'm sorry, you have those core volunteers already that's been through that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you may be able to use PR dollars to help incorporate that program into the hunter safety current program that you already have. And then you would be able to educate hunters and non-hunters. You have, through that program, a lot of parents come with their kids, and they sit through that class right along with them, and they may be able to pick something up through that class that we already have available by just adding an extra program in it. I know it might make it a little bit longer of a class, but I think you could reach a lot of people that way. And then the other thing that it may do is we've heard about someone who's getting a violation, and then they go to a hunter safety class to get 4 demerits taken off of their license. If it was a trapping violation, then that person would sit through a trap education class through that hunter safety class.
I had not considered that when I put together these support materials, but I have since considered it because it came to my attention through reading some of the CAB reports. My concern with adding trapper education to basic hunter education, it's twofold. The first would be, I don't think we could do trapper education justice inside of a hunter education course without significantly increasing the length of our hunter education course. And we're passing 5,000 students almost a year through hunter education, most of which, in fact, the vast majority of which are not going on to become trappers. I'd be concerned that we could not do trapper education justice inside of hunter education. And then the second piece of the equation is we have been remodeling the way we provide hunter education because student participation and the participation of individuals have showed us that they actually are asking for decreased amounts of in-class time, that it is ever increasingly difficult to provide hunter ed to students on a time frame that they're able to come through our courses. We have a limited number of volunteers, and already we sometimes max out our hunter education for people that want to hunt and want to apply for tags. I would have significant concerns trying to wedge trapper education in there, increasing the amount of time that people had to spend in mandatory, because mind you, hunter education is mandatory in order to get a hunting license. I think we would do a disservice to our trapping public and to those who are just strictly interested in hunting. I'd have a grave concern with that. I also, I don't know if Martin Olson would be interested in speaking to that. It's brand new to him as well, but he runs our Southern Region hunter education program. If he had interest in saying how he thinks that would, he's got the biggest core of volunteers. I'm not sure how we would train a hunter ed volunteer who has no experience in trapping to teach trapper education.
But you touched on a really good point there. You put 5,000 people a year through that program. And we've said in here, and we've heard the trappers say the public needs to educate themselves on this, and the non-trappers are, on the other end of it. Here's a way that you could actually reach 5,000 people, more than 5,000 people a year, because that's just the people that you're giving the certificate for. That's not the people that the parents and everything else that's going on. I understand some of your concerns, I do, but when I went through hunter safety, it was 3 or 4 days class. Now it's 8 hours. And, I know this is a busy world, but, to me, this stuff is pretty dang important that you might want to take the little extra time, and maybe down here you'd have to pull all of your volunteers. I know right there in Eureka, some of the volunteers that are in that program, 2 or 3 of them are trappers. That would be a simple one. Maybe you could have someone that is a volunteer from Eureka or Elko or White Pine County. Maybe they would travel to Las Vegas to help teach a class, just that portion. I think it's just I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's something that we might want to look at a little bit.
I don't know of any states, right off the top of my head, I'm not saying there's not any, that incorporate trapper education into basic hunter education. And again, I did want to bring Martin. He is the Southern Region Hunter Education Coordinator. He maintains by far the largest corps of volunteers, and we run the most number of classes in the Southern Region. So I would actually appreciate his input too.
Great, thank you. Once again, Martin Olson for the record, Southern Region Hunter Education Coordinator. With the International Hunter Education Association, and we've been looking at parameters for hunter education and barriers why people aren't getting in to hunting, and one of them is a time constraint. So what we've done as a whole across the nation is kind of looked at, what is the bare minimum someone needs to be able to go hunting, their bare basic core values. After that, there can be other specialty classes, such as muzzleloader, trapping, other classes as people want to expand their knowledge in hunting and go into different things. They have that opportunity to take other courses in that. So as Teresa mentioned, we're basically looking at kind of reducing the hours in hunter education to allow people time constraints to get out there, get their hunter education, and have that minimal core value to be able to go hunting and receive their license.
Can I add a little bit to that? Nevada's fairly unique in that we have significantly more demand than we have supply for our resources. A lot of states in the Midwest and the South have the reverse situation where they're leaving opportunity, what they view as opportunity in the field, and they have determined that one of the limitations to maximizing that opportunity is the education requirements. So they've taken the amount of time required down. They've tried to facilitate education. They have online only. And so as we look at our situation and perhaps try to increase the rigors of that education, while the national trend, and there's reciprocity between all the states, while the national trend is to streamline it and make it easier, essentially what we do is we force some of our hunters to go online and take the Tennessee class online, which they can do in an hour, and then with reciprocity, then they come into Nevada. And so I understand what Commissioner Bliss is saying, and there is infrastructure there, but there's two issues in my mind. One is the national trend, which is to make it easier, and I guess there's a whole lot of challenges there, and we can certainly look at options. But when people look at hunter ed, it's just like the school system. They think that we can address more in there. And right now, issues of fair chase, issues of trespass, ethics, responsibility, trying to cover all those and emphasize them, we simply don't have the time, we simply don't have the volunteers to try to do that. There may be some opportunity to address it or use some of that existing infrastructure, but it's probably oversimplified maybe in thinking that we can automatically incorporate that trapping education into it, but there certainly would be some resources there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I would just follow up with that in terms of, I think the online thing makes a lot of sense because it is kind of a more specialized thing. In an ideal world, if we had all the time and all the resources, maybe an in-person thing would make more sense. But there's no reason if we went to an online system, and I really think it's got to have some Nevada-specific content because I think that's, in my mind, the biggest area for gain. There's nothing that would prevent some of those volunteers to help a student through that either. I don't think. I mean, there's nothing that says, someone couldn't help tutor a student through that online course and everything else. And I completely understand where you're going with it, Chad, but in the interest of, trying to get something up and going and really getting more information out there, I think that's kind of where I'm at this point. But Commissioner Young, you had a comment.
I mean, we're talking about trapper education here. It's a very specific slice of that, and I think we're getting way too broad and going into the hunting part. And to get the mission done, I think that online is clearly the way to go.
Commissioner McNinch?
Okay, so I'm going to be divergent on this one. I've thought about the trapper education thing quite a bit, and I'm not for making it mandatory, to be quite honest with you, and at all. And here's why. I'm fully on board with outreach to the trappers and to the public regarding trapping, best management practices for trappers, things of that nature. I'm all for providing information that the agency has, and it can share with things. But the real bottom line for me, and we can say, people do it for recreation, it's just a hobby. But the fact of the matter is they can sell the hides. To me, it's a commercial activity. And I don't think NDOW should begin in the business of trying to teach how to run good, ethical, lawful businesses. And we should be in we set policy, we set a law, and we should be setting ourselves up to enforce those laws like we do most other places. And to me, it's different. It's different than drawing a tag and going out and getting an animal, bringing home game. And that's just where I'm at on it. I do oversee a certification program. They do get very burdensome. They can be very time consuming. They change over time. You can go to an online. I can tell you that you can set an 8-hour online course. So you got to set your curriculum. Somebody's going to come in with a bigger, better online course that you have to evaluate. Is that something we want to let people use? I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I can tell you, there's no end to it for me so far. And I'm not sure what we're accomplishing. We're going to teach ethics. Everything that we expect is laid out in law already. And that's just kind of where I'm at on it right now. And I haven't been able to change my mind on it. I guess that's just where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I guess I would respectfully disagree to some extent. I think while a lot of this is laid out in law, some of those laws, and they're getting more and more complex as we go forward, and I don't think it hurts to make clear to people whether they're doing it for recreational activity or otherwise, really giving them the tool and the opportunity to have a better understanding of what those laws are. Because for being someone who sits on this board and being immersed in this, some of it's still a little complex for me to digest. And so I know someone getting into it, it's going to be a little bit over their head. And so I think that's where I really see the value in terms of setting some level of expectation and really having Nevada-specific content so they better understand what those regulations are, even though they are laid out in law. I just think an entry-level type person would struggle picking up that booklet and really trying to learn all that.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding things a little bit. Is there because we've talked about combining it with hunter education and stuff, which is mandatory, and I'm voicing my concern that I'm not ready to go that way, where you're certifying or somebody has to take a course in order to get a trapping license. By virtue of having a trapping license, you're basically attesting to knowledge of the laws that apply. That's a condition of it. You're basically saying, I understand what I need to deal with. If we're talking about outreach, that's fine. I'm not sure that we need to set up online stuff to do that, because then in order to get that message across, which is our goal, you almost have to mandate that. And so then you have to have a mechanism for determining if somebody's complied with that, if they've met those requirements. So I'm all for outreach. I'm all for getting, here's what the laws say, here's what it means, having that conversation, that communication. But to require some kind of a class or a course or something like that, or a certification, I'm not in favor of that to get there. If it's an outreach thing, that's fine, but I'm not on board for the certification stuff.
Charlene?
I certainly don't think it should be part of hunter education. I mean, I taught, and if you're not teaching students directly what they are interested in, that's going to be a complete turnoff. And, there are a lot of hunters who aren't interested in trapping, and they want to know about hunting, they want to know the hunting laws, they want to know those issues, they're not interested in anything else. And I think if you try to do something like that, you're going to create a real set of problems. I have a tendency to agree with Commissioner McNinch in many respects. I do see it as different. I do see trapping and it's a business. It's very different from hunting or fishing. So I am, kind of at a loss in terms of looking at what you've proposed, the areas that you've proposed, because I'm assuming that, they better know this stuff before they start trapping. Is it up to us to teach them that? I'm not convinced necessarily, personally, I don't want them to be a better trapper. Does that make sense? I really don't want them to be a better trapper. So I have some of the same concerns right now. This came up in the Trapping Regulation Committee, and, we've talked about this, but I'm still not sure what the purpose, what is our goal in providing this training?
Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you, Chairman Drew. I really don't have any hesitation about looking at alternatives for trapper education. There are all types of personal and professional activities that require education and licensing as a prerequisite to doing it. But I think when we look at this, I understand we certainly cannot mandate the general public to take any type of class. I almost think you have to look at two components to trapping education. One educational component to trappers, if that's what we're going to pursue and what method it takes, and then another type of public outreach education to the non-trapping community about when does trapping occur, things of that nature. So I really look at kind of two components of this issue. But the first thing is have to define the objective. What do you want to achieve through any education program? Because unless you define the objective, you're really just spinning your wheels talking about concepts, and I think that's the first step we need to do as a commission. What is the objective that we're trying to accomplish through any educational program?
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that statement at all, and I think the way the agenda item is listed, we're talking about one component of that today. We're really talking about the trapper education, the person that wants to become a trapper or is a trapper, whether or not that be mandatory or a voluntary thing. And Commissioner Lane, I'm not advocating for teaching someone to become a better trapper, but I am advocating for someone becoming a better informed trapper. I guess that's my objective, to put it in Commissioner Johnston's context. So as we go through this, just being true to the agenda item and the way it's agendized, I think we're talking specific today about trapper education and the people that have or want to become a trapper and hold a license. And not to discount the importance of the public education component of this, because we talked a lot about that in the committee, and that's probably a topic for another day, but let's keep it to the agenda item. While I agree there are two key components there. So Commissioner Lane, while I'm at this side.
So let's look at the objective options. I mean, let's start. Teresa's provided those for us. And so in terms of looking at each one of these areas, clearly trapping safety is important, it would seem to me. Trapping ethics and responsibility, Nevada-specific regulations are important. I would think in terms of whatever we're trying to do is trying to educate the trapper. But knowing and preparing trapping equipment, handling the catch, it just seems to me that, the Nevada Trappers, what I don't want to do is I want to try, if we're going to do this, we need to separate out what there is already an educational effort by Nevada Trappers Association in some respects. And I think we need to separate out what we're attempting to do and not try to duplicate those efforts. Does that make sense? I think we need to be very careful about not trying to duplicate what's already being done.
I agree. Commissioner Johnston.
Thank you, Chairman Drew. I would think back to like hunter's education. They don't really teach you how to hunt. They teach you about the ethics, the safety component, the fair chase, things of that. I would think you could model a trapper education process off of hunter's education. It doesn't teach people how to trap, just as hunter's education doesn't teach people how to hunt, but it gives you an awareness of what you have to be mindful of when you're engaging in hunting activities, similarly with trapping activities. So my view would be, the objective of any trapper education would be, the safety, the ethics and responsibilities, the Nevada-specific regulations, avoiding conflict with the public, things of that nature that have dominated a lot of committee discussion and time of this commission.
And just coming off those two comments, if you look at the objective page there, 2, 3, and 7 are probably my highest priority. I think number 1, you might need to some degree just to set up the discussion on those. And I think avoiding conflict is probably another one that we really need to address. That's kind of when I envision it. I don't disagree at all. I think 4, 5, and 6 are probably better done in person, and I do know Nevada Trappers Association already handles some of those issues, and so I think I'm comfortable with that and where the conversation's going, and I think this is the input that ultimately we're going to need going forward. But I know I had some commission comment on this side, so Commissioner Bliss.
Well, kind of going off what Commissioner Johnston just said is the reason why I thought you could have a section in your hunter safety course that was related to trapping. It wasn't to do an 8-hour course on trapping. It was one section, just like you go through the muzzleloader section, you go through a pistol section, a rifle section, you go through a section on how to cross a fence in and out of a boat, and then you just have a section in that class on those 3 topics, or that you guys have just discussed, the ethics, trapping safety. These people that are going out in the field to hunt may encounter a trap. So I understand how everyone feels on it, but I just wanted you to know why I thought it would be a fit in the current trapper or in the hunter safety program, because it's exactly the same thing that Commissioner Johnston just said that we touch on in that class. Not saying that in order to get a trapping license, you have to go through the hunter safety course. I don't think that should be mandated at all. I just thought that we could touch on it in the hunter safety course to help educate. And so I just wanted to make that clear.
Any other commission thoughts, questions, comments? Commissioner McNitch.
So I'm just going to go back. Again, I don't have a problem with the outreach aspect, talking to trappers about trapping safety, trapping ethics and responsibilities, Nevada-specific regulations. I don't have a problem with the outreach component of it. I guess it's in how we get that message to them is I think that setting up a course and determining are we going to do online. I can tell you right now we got some correspondence on things that should be incorporated in a course that we haven't considered here. They came in from the public, and I feel like it's perpetual. Okay, we're never, the conversation doesn't have to go that far in my mind. To me it's pretty simple. It's a function of having a conversation. How can we get this information out to trappers, to the public, specific messages related to things like trapping safety, how do you release animals, some of the laws or some of the standards and best practices that trappers do use, at least most of them. I think the majority of them, what they're trying to hold themselves accountable to, leg hold versus the bear claw traps that everybody has in their mind, that kind of stuff. And I think that there's a place for that, but it's the delivery system and it's the how we get there. I know that as a government agency, it's just another thing to have to maintain. Instead of messaging, it becomes a program, and that's I don't see it working as a program.
Commissioner Lane.
Do we have any idea of how many new trapping licenses are issued each year? I mean, we know what the numbers are. It's about 1,300. So, depending on how you decide who has to take this class, you may or may not be talking about a very small number of people. So, I mean, that's got to consider, you've got to take that into account as well. You're certainly not talking about the 5,000 people that you train on hunter education. There's a big difference in numbers here. So, I think that's going to also make a determination of what we're talking about, because I'm assuming if we say you take this class once, we haven't talked about that at all, the options that were offered to us. So, if you're taking the class once, depending on the number of new licenses, you're certainly probably not talking about a huge number of additional people each year. So that's got to, again, figure into what we're attempting to do here.
Commissioner Bliss.
This is just a thought. What if we put together somewhat of a brochure type document that had, some of these topics in it, the trapping safety and ethics and some of our current laws that we have, some of the trail setbacks and stuff, and then at every licensed trapper, that something like that is mailed to them. And then the person who has the hunting license or the trapping license, this is also some information that goes out to him. And now I know that some trappers may be able buy one halfway through the season or something like that, and there may be a lag, but maybe you could go off the previous year's trapping license sales and send that information out instead of doing a course or anything like that.
Okay, good point. Any other discussion? We've hashed this over pretty good up here, so. Let's open it up to CAB input and comment, and as I'm inviting CABs up to discuss this, let's stay specific to the item, please.
Bob Cook with the Douglas Cab. I'd like to make it clear that all the comments that I've made today so far were my comments or comments of the general public or general discussion we had at our meeting. We did not have an official meeting. We did not have a quorum. We only had 2 members of the CAB and members of the public. So what we did was we went through the entire agenda and just discussed it. So all of the notes and everything, all the comments I've made were unofficial. I just wanted to make that point clear, sorry. We did talk about this item, and the general discussion was that they really wanted the option that required the least regulation, the least amount of money for Nevada Department of Wildlife, and the least amount of money for trappers. And because of that, we really felt that the online option was the best option. As far as the objective options go, we really agreed with what Commissioner Drew and Commissioner Johnson said. Do want to bring up the fact that the library has free computers for everybody's use, and most of our tags are done online also. And the other thing that they brought up was they really did not want to make it mandatory. So, thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Chairman, Clark Cab. We had a good discussion on this, and I think it really centers around where Commissioner Bliss was in his comments, is that we feel it's very important to have more general education to everybody on trapping. But in addition to just having education on trapping to the consumptive public, the people that sat in our audience from Coal Creek and non-consumptive users in there, they felt just as strongly that they wanted to learn more about trapping. In fact, some of the people said, if I knew more about trapping, maybe I'd be less afraid of it. And maybe I'd understand better how to do things or understand better how to avoid stuff. And I believe it was the last commission meeting that John Sullivan, part of the trapping committee, handed you guys all a pamphlet, I think, from one of our surrounding states. It kind of showed some of the stuff. And I don't know if TrailSafe has come up with a less slick-looking version, but something very similar to that. And I think that whatever we do in education around trapping, it should cover not only the consumptive, but the non-consumptive user. And that was really the tone of all the discussions we had at the Clark Cab. There'll be other people here that will testify that were at my meeting the other night that will put details on their specific viewpoints, but that's the general viewpoint. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Any other cabs? Carson.
Giuliana, Carson Advisory Board. The question, because trapping receives so much attention last couple of years. I think we felt it was important to make sure that some of those items that were on Teresa's list, particularly the awareness, and I think the Trapping Association has made it very apparent to their membership about the interaction with the public. So everybody's been sensitized to it. It definitely would not hurt to add something in the in the hunter education with regards to trapping, just because a lot of those people will eventually become trappers. And so having both the hunter safety and the fact that they've been conditioned to the sensitivity in some areas, congested areas particularly, and like somebody was mentioned earlier, the Trapping Association provides a tremendous amount of information to trappers, and I don't know a single trapper that I've ever talked to that hasn't learned how to trap from an experienced trapper. I mean, there's lots of books, there's lots of data on it, but there's nothing like having somebody hold your hand and show you how to do it. And so I think that, adding something to the hunter safety course and making people aware of some of the social interaction issues that have been talked about odd for the last couple of years, odd to make us to the point where we're all severely conditioned about the sensitivity of it, should be spread around to everybody else. And that's the best way to do it. And if there's a separate course that we really need to take, I think, of course, for the departments, an expense portion of it online would definitely be the quickest and least expensive to the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral County. The one thing about trapping, it's historically brought down from the father or an uncle or some relative or maybe a friend. If you're going to take it into hunter safety or you're going to make it mandatory class, now you're opening it up for more people that may want to look at getting into it and how to do it. The thing about it is, most trappers that are trapping out there today, it has been handed to them. Several of the trappers in Mineral County, their sons have taken it over from their dads. They have acquired their dad's traps. Most of the things that are out there, we're trying to figure out what to do with those people, and those people learned their habits, whether they be good or bad, from their relatives or their peers. And those are the things that we're trying to, you guys are trying to get around. So, I don't know where we just keep working this over, but the thing you need to step back and look, I think, is the trappers themselves. I had a father-in-law that trapped, and when he retired, his traps went, nobody in the family wanted it. That was the end of that era. And that's, I think, is where we're going with a lot of this. So we just have to think about what we're doing, what we're trying to promote. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Any other county, I'll finish up with county advisory boards and then I'll do public comment. Just a moment.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'll get to you, I promise.
Miles Humphreys, Washoe Cab. We were in support of education. We didn't really pick it apart too much. But my personal opinion on the trapping is I think that it definitely has to be dovetailed with hunter education. At some point, a hunter is going to come across a trap, just like I mentioned earlier, out chucker hunting with dog in a trap and whatnot. And I think a couple little things that can be implemented into the hunter safety and possibly 15, 20 minutes, we're pretty efficient at crunching things into time, is for one, the trapping ethics and the responsibilities. At least mention it out there, because there is a lot of first-time people that are getting these 5,000 roughly licenses a year. And then knowing and preparing the trapping equipment, which was one of the things on the agenda, that I think is huge too, because I myself, I've been hunting for years and years and years, been out in the field pretty much all over Nevada, and I've never came across an instance where my dog or an animal was in a trap and having to deal with that until it was that, oh, shoot, instance. And then knowing the fur-bearing species, we could educate people on what kind of animals are out there competing with the other critters that are cohabiting with other wildlife. But maybe there was a point that was brought up to the Trappers Association or department to put together a packet that is sent to all the trappers, and something and that information be read and signed and returned as part of getting your license. It's just a little tidbit of information. I mean, who's to say that there's not a first-time trapper out there, and he's pretty much dumbfounded to the whole aspect. And so if there's a packet that could educate them more, that goes in conjunction with getting that license, that would be a good thing. So, like I said, these are mostly my thoughts, because the cab didn't pick this over too much. They were just in full support of whatever education is possible to get out there for the hunters and the trappers. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's probably all of our cabs, unless Pershing's about the only one that hasn't talked. So I'll open it up to public comment, and again, same request, let's stay on this agenda item. I know we're getting close to lunch, so come on up. I know we had at least one person interested in speaking on it.
My apologies. I'm Edna Clem from Cold Creek, and talking about public education, what about putting out a pamphlet that tells you how to get a dog or a pet or a child out of a trap without touching the trap? I would be very interested, other than bringing your backpack out and staying by the trap. The other question is, what if they put their phone number on the trap, so at least you could call someone and get them out there as quick as possible? Thank you.
Additional public comments on this one? Jana? Come on up. Feel free to fill the other microphone.
Mr. Chair, for the record, Jana Wright. After listening to the commission discussion, I've kind of waffled on some of my opinion. If you move forward with trapper education, I certainly think it has to be online. I would like to see an example of what current course content is from vendors who promote trapper education online. I think that trapper safety and ethics and Nevada-specific regulations are critical. Certainly don't want to teach people how to trap other than safely removing animals from a trap. And I would like to be able to take such a course just to make sure the content was giving my views of trapping is a business and that trapping people make their money. And so I think that's it. Thank you.
Dave, go ahead.
Dave Stillwater, Nevada Trappers Association. Mr. Johnson, Mr. Bliss, they've talked pretty much about everything I agree with. But public and trapper education, the public needs to be aware of what's going on. Trapper education, you're talking online. That sounds good. The only thing about it is there's so many things you can miss. I mean, the maps, diseases, all kinds of things that I don't know if it would be in the online, but I mean, a lot of this stuff you got to have hands-on. We have Trappers Education Day for the Trappers Association. A lot of people come on out and learn, which is great. The thing with the education, we got a lot of people that think, well, they went to public or Trappers Education and they still ended up getting a ticket or something like that. It's not going to stop everything. There's still going to be a rare animal caught, cat, dog, whatever. But I think you got to spend a lot more time and think about it. I don't think you can make a decision right now. You could put 20 trappers in a room, intelligent trappers, and they could sit on down and try figuring on out what should be in this class. We wouldn't get it all. You need some of the people on the other side looking at it. Not that I agree with them very often, but they might come up with an idea that we missed. I don't think it's just one thing you can throw right out and do it right now. I'm more concerned that the public is educated. And another thing I'm really concerned about is there's 200,000 feral cats in Clark County. They have diseases and stuff. That's where I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Carmen Rhoda, for the record. I just want to say that I am in favor of, trapping education. I feel that in this whole arena with hunters and trappers, that the rules don't seem to apply across the board. And one thing I'm referring to specifically is for the hunters and the fishermen, there's a limit on the harvest that you can take. I mean, you have to get a license, but you're limited to the harvest that you can take in, but there doesn't seem to be a limit on the trappers. They can get one license and they can bring in as many pelts as they want. The hunters can't make a profit off of their kill, but the trappers can. So if the hunters are required to have a safety education course, I feel that the trappers should have to as well. And I would be interested in attending these classes myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? If there's anyone else, come on up and give the microphone on the right some attention, because it's been pretty lonely over there.
Hi, Janet Little, for the record. Basically, she stole some of my thunder just now, but anyways, I'm kind of on that same page. I know a lot of hunters. I'm a fly fisher woman, I guess you'd say, have been since the 1980s. And I know that anything I've learned about fly fishing, the rules, the regulations, I know every time you get your license, they hand you a little book, that tells you all the new regulations, things like that. It's up to you as an adult to take the responsibility for what it is that you're choosing to do. If you're going to hunt, same thing. That's a mandatory education, which I think is wonderful. I know tons of hunters. Most of them didn't need the education because of our age. But like I said, I think it's a wonderful thing. The trapping, I think, should be more for the public in education. I think if people were a little bit more aware of the activity that's taking place and what to do in the instance, because most people I talked to had no clue what's even going on out there, and they're like, well, what do you do in that? I'm like, well, I start calling all the phone numbers and hope for the best. Up there in Coal Creek, we have billboards where they have a lot of different things. The Department of Wildlife is very good about putting phone numbers, different things. They have a lot of the information. I know after the incidents that happened up there, they did put a little flyer up. Actually, the forestry did, I believe. It's a printout from a printer that's put in a plastic casing that does say a little bit about trapping now. I think that more education in some of the bulletins, that they have throughout the national parks, I think would help.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Myers from Lee Canyon, and because there's no video conferencing today, I am representing TrailSafe, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this commission. The major input for the content for the Trapper Education course will certainly arise from the NRS and the NAC that govern the activities of people who choose to use leg hold traps and snares for their recreation and profit. Hunters and fishermen have strict laws and regulations, but for trappers, not so much. Why? there are no limits on the number of traps that you can use. There are no limits on bag limits. There's
Stephanie,
nothing.
you can address that in public comment, but for now, stick to the item, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, I'm saying that trappers have very few restrictions, and it is commerce. Now, after the NRS and the NAC, the NDOW law enforcement obviously should create the second major input for the course by reinforcing the laws and providing examples which are dominant in this state, the state of Nevada, Nevada-specific laws. What must not be overlooked in such a course is input from TrailSafe and animal advocates. Topics should include the laws in various states and countries concerning leghold trapping, including our closest neighboring states, and comparing those laws and regulations and their foundations to Nevada's. It should include not only the history and tradition of trapping in the 1800s, but also the principles of the humane movement, which focus mainly on the physical, mental, and emotional states of all animals, not just humans. Animals have the capacity for consciousness, and they also have the ability to feel pain. This needs to be included. In the course, it should include the fact that companion animals and non-target species are trapped, injured, and killed in large numbers, as evidenced by just the tip of the iceberg NDOW data that's been collected so far. There are less than 1,300 trappers in the state, and so the views of the over 99% of the population, 2.7 million people in the state of Nevada, those opinions need to be represented. Those people do not use leghold traps. That's over 99%. And trappers tell us that state and federal recreation areas are multi-use. Yes, they are multi-use, and trappers have to share those areas with hikers, bikers, stargazers, bird watchers, ATV users, skiers, horseback riders, and many other recreation users. The difference, and this needs to be included in the course, is that traps, being indiscriminate devices, have the ability to injure and kill. And as most of you know, it has affected even my own dog, Sunshine. So 99% of the recreation and public lands is not used by trapping, and most people are totally unaware that trapping is happening. The course should include a discussion of wildlife management and the science that guides it. And science isn't just setting up a bunch of traps and seeing what is killed and what isn't killed. Science actually has a hypothesis, field testing, examination, and analysis of the results. Such a course should of necessity be posted mostly online. The Nevada Trappers Association can teach people how to trap and kill animals, and they do, and they even allow about 20 minutes to NDOW law enforcement to talk. But after attending 3 such Nevada Trapping Association education days, it's obvious that their goal is to indoctrinate youth and new outdoors people into this cruel, barbaric activity. And this is not acceptable for those of us who are fighting for the humane treatment of animals. So everyone who applies for a trapping license, whether they're new or grizzled, must be required to take this course and pass a test. Look who young trappers presently have as role models. The president of the Nevada Trappers Association and a Nevada assemblyman can't even follow the current trapping regulations. A former Clark County cab member creates a YouTube video which is deemed so inappropriate that he must step down from the post. All of these people represent the old guard of trapping and the idea that trappers can do anything, whatever, whenever they want to. So everybody who applies for a trapping license should have to take such a class, and they should uphold the law. Licenses must be rescinded if they do not. The course could be modeled on the present hunter education course, which all hunters are required to take and pass before receiving a hunting license. It should include safety, ethics, responsibility, informations. Trappers are the ones that should pay for the complete budget of the class, just as most workers must pay for continuing education for their jobs. So why do hunters and fishermen have to take a course trappers don't? Why are trappers exempted? TrailSafe and animal advocates must have a seat at the table in creating this course and its content. Ask Trish Swain, TrailSafe's founder, to sit down and help set the curriculum and listen to what she has to say. Education is essential. We thank the Wildlife Commission for suggesting that a trapper education course is essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Commissioner Young.
Chairman, I'm more confused now than when we started as to what we're trying to do, and I would offer this. I'd like to see what the adjacent states to Nevada are currently doing as an example in this area. So that would be Idaho, California, Utah, Oregon, and Arizona.
Yeah, I think we've had some of those discussions, and unless something's changed in the course of cabin public comment, I think basically my feel from where this board is at this point we're comfortable with a voluntary outreach program, and beyond that I'm not so sure we've gotten much further down the road. And so I think the discussion has been helpful for me to kind of frame up where we're at, and where we're at is all over the board, but I think that component at least is something that we're all to some degree comfortable with. So I think what we'll do at this point, I'm not going to be looking for any action because I don't think we're at a place where we can take it today. But having kind of have that framed up, maybe take some time with staff and pick their brain a little bit in terms of some of those options going forward. And if Teresa, that's all right with you, that's kind of where I'm at this point, because obviously, as you can see, we're all over the map here. So get a little better focus going forward. All right. Anything else on this, Commissioner McNinch?
Just a real quick comment. Teresa, you did a nice job of trying to frame the conversation with us. It was, we didn't leave you with much to get started, and really appreciate the time you guys put into, you and your staff put into kind of framing up the conversation for us. So.
Commissioner Lane, did you have any further comment?
No, not really, but I do want to say thank you to staff, Teresa, for the work that you did. I do think that was important in helping us try to better define where we're trying to go.
Commissioner Johnson, did you have something? Anyone over here?
Others have already said what I was going to say, so I won't repeat it.
All right. At this point, I'm getting a lot of low blood sugar looks from the audience and from the podium up here. So we are at 12:20. What I'm going to do is I'm going to recess for lunch until 1:30. In doing that, I'm going to make an announcement that the commission is going to take this time to have a non-meeting with our attorney in the back office here to discuss some pending litigation. So everyone enjoy lunch. I just wanted to let you know what we were doing when we all walk into the back room here together. So with that being said, I'll see everyone back here at 1:30.